I lived alone for 15 years, and if I'm being honest, there were moments when I came dangerously close to losing my independence completely. It was a slow drift. It wasn't a major tragedy, but small, quiet mistakes. The kind that older people make slowly until life becomes harder than they ever imagined. People assume I've always been wise, but after my wife died, I stopped paying attention. Loneliness changes you when nobody is there to notice. Today, I'm sharing the 7 mistakes that almost changed everything. Because if you live alone, these small habits matter more than you realize. The first mistake was losing my rhythm. I stopped nourishing my body and my spirit. The first mistake I made was refusing help because of pride. After my wife passed, everyone offered, my daughter, my son, even neighbors. Every time I said, "I'm fine." But there's a difference between independence and stubbornness. Needing help felt humiliating, and I was protecting my pride instead of my safety. One winter, I climbed a ladder alone to clean the roof. I slipped. That terror as I lost balance. Had I fallen, I might never have lived independently again. Pride is dangerous when it prevents you from accepting support. Nobody would have found me quickly. That thought stays with me deeply. Accepting help isn't losing strength, it's how you keep it. But there was another mistake, even quieter than pride. The second mistake was letting isolation become normal. At first, it felt peaceful. But slowly, that peace turned into a wall. Days passed where I spoke to almost nobody. Isolation changes your mind. You stop caring about routines. The world slowly shrinks until it's only as big as your living room. At 76, I realized I had started talking to the television just to hear another voice. That realization frightened me. We aren't designed for this. Connection is emotional medicine. The longer you isolate, the harder it is to re-enter life. Loneliness convinces you to withdraw, then punishes you for it. We have to keep building those bridges, even when it feels easier to stay on our own island. The third mistake I made was neglecting my body because I was old anyway. That mindset is poison. After my wife died, I stopped cooking and caring. I justified it by asking what difference it made at my age. But once you emotionally give up, physical decline accelerates. You become a shadow of yourself. At 77, my doctor told me I was becoming weak much faster than I should be. Weak. That word terrified me because weakness in old age creates dependence quickly. I realized independence requires maintenance. I started walking and cooking again. Not to be young, but to be responsible for the vessel that carries my spirit. Taking care of yourself is a form of love for your future self. But there was a fourth mistake, one that almost cost me my peace. I'll tell you about it next. The fourth mistake I made was ignoring small memory problems. Now listen, some forgetfulness is normal with age, but I started dismissing things I should have paid attention to. Missed appointments, forgotten medications, leaving the stove on once, then twice, losing track of conversations. And because I lived alone, nobody else noticed the pattern forming. That's one of the hidden dangers of aging alone. There's no second set of eyes observing your decline gradually. One evening, I drove to the grocery store and completely forgot why I was there. I stood in the parking lot, staring at the entrance, trying to remember. That moment scared me badly. Not because I forgot groceries, because I suddenly realized how vulnerable aging alone can become when cognitive issues begin quietly. Thankfully, my doctor later explained much of my memory struggle was worsened by stress, grief, poor sleep, isolation, and depression. But had I continued ignoring it, things could have become far worse. Old age requires honesty, especially with yourself. We think we are protecting our dignity by hiding our slips, but we are only drifting further from the shore of who we are. The mind is a garden too. It needs a different kind of tending, a quiet honesty that admits when the paths are becoming overgrown. It's okay to ask for a second set of eyes. It's okay to admit that the fog is rolling in. That is where the light begins. When I finally spoke the truth to myself, the fear lost its grip. I wasn't losing my mind, I was just carrying too much weight. I started writing things down, I started talking more. I brought others into my world, so I wasn't walking the path alone anymore. But even as I found my way back to my mind, I realized there was a fifth mistake I was making. A mistake of the heart. The fifth mistake I made was turning my house into a hazard without realizing it. I had rugs everywhere. Poor lighting, cluttered walkways, loose cords, a slippery bathroom floor. And because I saw those things every day, I stopped noticing the danger. Until one night, I got up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m. My foot caught the edge of a rug, and I hit the floor hard enough to knock the breath out of myself. I lay there for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, thinking something terrifying. If I cannot get up, nobody will know. That thought changes a person. People underestimate how many elderly lives permanently change because of one simple fall. And once recovery becomes difficult, independence disappears quickly afterward. The ground beneath you isn't as solid as it used to be. The next week, my daughter came over and helped me make the house safer. She brought the second set of eyes I didn't know I needed. Grab bars, better lighting, removing rugs, organizing pathways. We were mending the fences of my freedom. At first, my pride hated it. It felt like admitting I was fading. Then my wisdom thanked her for it. Pride is a brittle branch. Wisdom is the root. Now, my home is no longer a trap. It is a sanctuary again. I can walk through the night without fear because I chose safety over silence. I realized that honoring my body means honoring the space it lives in. We are the keepers of our own temples, even when we need help with the repairs. But even as my home became safer, there was a sixth mistake I was making. One that had nothing to do with the walls around me. The sixth mistake I made was refusing emotional honesty. Men from my generation were trained to suppress pain, to keep the heart locked like a hidden room. Handle it privately. Stay strong. We were told that sharing our burden was a sign of weakness, a crack in the foundation of our dignity. So after my wife died, I carried grief like a silent winter, a heavy illness that no one could see, but that I felt in every bone. I smiled during phone calls, said I was doing fine. I wore a mask of competence while the world inside me was turning to lead. Pretended everything was under control. Meanwhile, inside the house, depression was quietly swallowing me whole, like a fog that has no end. I stopped answering calls sometimes, stopped attending church, stopped seeing friends. I was retreating into a cave of my own making. And depression in old age is dangerous because it rarely looks dramatic. It often looks like simple exhaustion, withdrawal, neglect, loss of motivation, a quiet surrender to life. That's exactly where I was headed. One afternoon, my daughter sat across from me. The silence between us felt heavy. She finally looked at me and asked, "Dad, are you lonely?" I broke down crying immediately. Not because of the question, but because the dam had finally broken. Because the weight of the lie was finally too much. It was because somebody had finally seen through me. She saw the man behind the father. That conversation changed the rhythm of my life. Because pretending to be emotionally strong nearly destroyed me emotionally. We think silence is a shield, but it is actually the weight that drags us down. Old age becomes much heavier when you carry everything alone in silence. It turns the autumn of our lives into a cold, leaden winter. Honesty is the bridge back to the living. It is the warmth of the fire that we all need to survive the long nights of the soul. I realize that my strength doesn't come from hiding my pain, but from honoring it, just as the tree honors the wind by swaying with it. But even as I opened my heart, I realized there was a seventh mistake I was making, one that involved the very way I walked the earth. The seventh mistake I made was believing independence meant never needing people. That belief almost cost me everything. I thought successful aging meant handling life alone, managing alone, coping alone, surviving alone. I thought strength was a wall I built around myself. But eventually I learned something painful. Complete isolation is not independence. It is vulnerability disguised as pride. It is a branch that tries to grow without the forest. Real independence in old age actually depends on connection. Friends who check on you, family who notice changes, neighbors who care, community, support systems, people. The older I became, the more I realized something deeply humbling. Human beings need each other until the very end. Not because we are weak, because we are human. At 78, I finally began rebuilding connection intentionally. I joined a morning walking group. I stopped walking the path alone and started walking with the world. Started attending church again. Accepted invitations instead of declining automatically. I realized that my door was meant to be a bridge, not a barrier. Allowed my children to help me without feeling ashamed. And slowly, life started returning to me again. Not perfectly, not magically, but meaningfully. I laughed more, slept better, felt sharper mentally, more alive emotionally. It was as if the colors of the world were finally being restored to me. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped feeling like I was waiting quietly for life to end. I was no longer a ghost in my own home. That's what isolation does to many elderly people. It slowly turns survival into passive existence. It turns the fire into cold ash before its time. And once that happens, decline speeds up frighteningly fast. We lose our grip on the shore because there are no hands to hold us steady. Protect your independence fiercely. But understand something important. Independence is not built through isolation. It is built through maintenance. Maintenance of your body. Keeping the vessel strong so it can carry you through the seasons. It requires a daily conversation with your own strength. Your home. Making sure the space you inhabit is a sanctuary, not a trap. It is the temple where your history lives, and it needs your care, your friendships. The bridges we build to others are the lifelines that keep us from drifting away. They require the effort of a simple hello. Your emotional health, your willingness to stay connected to life even after loss. It is the fire that we must tend so the cold doesn't set in. Your routines, your willingness to stay connected. And if you love someone elderly who lives alone, check on them more often than they claim they need. Because pride is loud, but vulnerability is often silent. Many older people will hide their struggle until the situation becomes dangerous. Be the second set of eyes they won't ask for. Be the warmth they are missing. And before I end this conversation, let me say one final thing. Growing old alone does not have to mean growing old helpless. There is still joy available. Still dignity, still purpose, still laughter, still life. But only if you continue participating in your own survival emotionally, physically, and socially. We are the keepers of the flame. We must keep moving, keep reaching, and keep honest with the mirror. That is how we honor the life we were given. So tell me honestly in the comments, which of these mistakes do you think is most dangerous for seniors living alone? Let's talk about the truths we often hide. And if this message spoke to you today, subscribe to the channel for more honest conversations about aging, loneliness, retirement, and the realities of growing older. Because sometimes one honest conversation can change the direction of somebody's final years completely. Thank you for walking this path with me.